Let's unpack something most of us were taught from. Mm-hmm. While day one about money, the standard advice, go to school, get good grades, find a secure job, maybe buy a house, and, save the rest. It's the path we see laid out. But what if the truly wealthy operate from a completely different playbook? Mm-hmm. What if they teach their kids something fundamentally opposite?
That's really the core question driving our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We've been digging into some source material, specifically excerpts from a pretty well-known book, and it contrasts the financial philosophies of these two key father figures. Mm-hmm. It really challenges that conventional wisdom you just mentioned.
Exactly.
So our mission for this dig dive is to take the principles, the mindset shifts from these sources and kind of distill them for you. Think of this as maybe a shortcut to understanding a different way of looking at money and wealth and, how you spend your time. We're going to get right to the heart of the distinctions these sources highlight between, the financial approaches of the rich versus the poor and middle class.
Yeah, and the premise the author starts with is powerful because it's based on his own experience. He essentially had two influential fathers. There was his biological father, who was highly educated, a brilliant academic government employee, but who consistently struggled financially. That's the poor dad.
Okay, the poor dad. And then the other one?
Then there was the father of his best friend, less formally educated, sure, but a successful entrepreneur who became like one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii, the rich dad.
Right, and their advice sounds like it was worlds apart.
Oh, completely. Poor dad stressed, study hard, get excellent grades, find that safe, high-paying job. His focus was all on scholastic professional excellence, working hard for money.
Okay, standard path.
Rich dad, though. He advised studying to be rich. His emphasis was on understanding how money actually works, and crucially, how to make money work for you. He had this mantra, like, I don't work for money, money works for me.
Okay, that's a huge difference right there. And this leads to something kind of interesting, maybe a bit uncomfortable. The source points out that formal education doesn't typically teach you about money, right? Financial education, or the lack of it, usually happens at home.
Mm-hmm. So if your parents have a poor or middle-class financial mindset, well, that's often the programming you receive. And the source argues this is precisely why you see these highly educated, incredibly smart professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, who are brilliant in their fields.
Yeah, top of their game professionally.
Exactly. But they still struggle financially their entire lives. They mastered working hard for the money, but not the other side of the coin, how to have their money work hard for them.
Which brings us right to, I guess, lesson number one from the source, the absolute fundamental.
Yeah, the cornerstone of financial intelligence, according to this source, knowing the difference between an asset and a liability.
Okay. And the definition from the source is, it's almost ridiculously simple, isn't it?
It really is. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket.
Puts money in.
And a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket.
Takes money out. Okay, pause there. Because that simple definition immediately clashes with what, most people consider financial truth. Doesn't everyone say your house is your greatest asset? The source really pushes back hard on that.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yep. And this is such a critical point in the source material. Based on that simple definition, puts money in versus takes money out. The source argues that for most people, their home, it's a liability, not an asset.
Even though it might go up in value?
Well, yeah, it might appreciate over time, maybe. But month after month, year after year, it takes money out. Think about it. The mortgage payment, especially the interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, all that stuff, that's cash flowing out.
Okay. So according to the source, if your house is your biggest investment, you might actually be in financial trouble because so much of your capital is tied up in something that's mainly causing expenses, not generating income. And it might be stopping you from buying things that do put money in your pocket.
Precisely. And understanding this distinction, it lets the source illustrate the typical cash flow patterns. For the poor, it's simple. Income comes in, expenses take it all out. There's nothing left to acquire assets.
Straight in, straight out. Got it.
Right. Now, the middle class pattern is more complex. And the source argues it's what traps people in the rat race. Income's often pretty good, maybe even substantial, and it increases over time. But as income rises, expenses also climb. And they tend to acquire significant liabilities. Bigger houses, bigger mortgages, car loans, consumer debt, credit cards.
So the money comes in, but a huge chunk just flows right back out to pay for all these things that are taking money out.
Exactly. Their balance sheet might list the house and car as assets, sure, but their cash flow statement shows these things are drains.
Okay. Okay, I see the pattern. Income in, then out to taxes, expenses, servicing liabilities.
Now, compare that to the pattern of the rich, as described in the source. They focus their income, and sometimes borrowed money, on building their asset column. They buy things like income-generating real estate, rental properties, stocks, bonds, businesses, intellectual property maybe.
Things that actually produce income.
Right. These assets then generate income rent, dividends, profits, royalties, which flows into their pocket. And this asset income, it not only covers their expenses, but is often reinvested back into buying more assets.
So their asset column grows, which generates more income, which they use to grow the asset column even more. It's like a positive feedback loop. Money working to them.
That's the model the source presents. And this really underscores the point that just making more money isn't the solution if you don't get this fundamental cash flow difference. It's not just about how much you make, it's how much you keep and what you do with it. And this is where financial intelligence or financial IQ becomes so crucial.
So financial IQ isn't just like being good with numbers or balancing your checkbook.
Not according to this source, no. Financial IQ is what you do with money once you have it. It's about knowing how to keep people from taking your taxes. Mainly how to keep it working for you longer and, how to make it multiply. The source suggests most people just don't grasp basic cash flow because they were never taught, and that lack of understanding holds them back no matter how hard they work.
Which totally explains the highly educated professionals who struggle. Experts at working hard for money. But maybe not so much at making their money work hard for them.
Precisely. And to illustrate this, the source uses the cash FCMA flow quadrant concept. It basically divides people into 4 buckets based on where their income comes from. You've got E for employee, you have a job, S for self-employed, or small business owner, you kind of own a job.
Okay, E and S. Most people are probably there.
Right. Then there's B for a big business owner, where you own a system or a network of people working for you. An I for investor, where your money works for you.
So E and S are where your income is directly tied to your own effort, your time. If you stop working, the money stops, or at least slows way down.
Correct. And traditional education, the source argues, overwhelmingly prepares people for the E and S quadrants. It teaches you skills to get a job or, hang out your own shingle.
Makes sense.
The rich Stan's advice, though, was all about moving towards B and I. The quadrants where your income is generated by systems or assets, freeing your time from that direct trade for dollars.
That transition feels like a really central theme here. And it leads right into another key lesson from the source: mind your own business.
Yeah, and this one's often misunderstood. It doesn't necessarily mean like quit your job tomorrow and start selling widgets.
Right.
In the context of the source, mind your own business means actively focusing on building your asset column, regardless of what your day job is.
Okay. So you might keep your regular job for the income.
For the cash flow.
But your real focus, your business, is using a chunk of that income to buy assets, things that generate income independently of you showing up to work.
Exactly. The source uses this great metaphor. Think of every dollar you put into your asset column as like a tiny employee. Once you've bought that asset with that dollar, that little dollar employee goes to work for you 24/7, potentially for generations, making more money.
I like that. Dollar employees working around the clock, that definitely changes your perspective on spending, especially on, say, luxuries.
Oh, absolutely. According to the source, the rich buy luxuries last. They prioritize building that asset column first. Once their assets are throwing off enough passive income to cover their expenses and pay for the luxury item, then they buy it.
Whereas the poor and middle class
tend to buy luxuries first, often using their earned income, or worse, debt, before they've built any real asset base. They might buy the big house or the fancy car to look rich, but they're often just digging themselves deeper into liabilities.
So it's not about not enjoying nice things. It's about the sequence. Asset income first, then the luxuries are paid for by the assets.
Precisely. Okay, shifting gears just a bit. The source offers a really interesting, sometimes kind of provocative perspective on taxes and how the rich use legal structures.
Yeah, this section can feel a bit challenging because it pushes against common ideas. What's the source's take on the history of taxes?
Well, the source argues that the idea of taxing the rich more heavily, the whole Robin Hood principle, while maybe well-intentioned at first, it led to governments developing this ever-increasing need, this appetite for money. And as the rich found ways to adapt, to use legal means to minimize their tax burden, the load shifted more and more onto the middle class, who often didn't have the same financial education or access to those structures.
And the key structure the source points to is the corporation.
The corporation. The source calls it the biggest secret of the rich. Now, corporations weren't just invented for taxes, right? They were used way back to limit liability, like the risk in funding sailing voyages centuries ago. But crucially, they also offer significant tax advantages that most employees just don't have access to.
Okay, how does the tax flow differ between an employee and a corporation, according to the source?
This is a really key distinction they make. An employee earns income from their job.
Right.
Then taxes are taken out. Then they spend what's left. So income, taxes, expenses.
Yep. Got it. Earn, get taxed, spend.
For a corporation, the flow is often different. The corporation earns income. Then it pays many of its expenses, legitimate business costs, travel, maybe owner salaries, benefits, things like that. Then it's taxed only on the net profit that remains. So income, expenses, taxes.
Whoa. So things like business travel, meals with clients, maybe part of your car costs, education related to the business, those can potentially be pre-tax expenses for the corporation.
Often, yes, if they're legitimate business expenses. Whereas an employee pays for similar things out of money that's already been taxed.
That's a big difference.
Huge. The source also mentions specific legal strategies, like the 1031 exchange in real estate. That allows investors to defer capital gains tax when they sell one investment property and roll the proceeds into another similar one. These are legal advantages built right into the system, but you need that financial literacy to know about them and use them effectively. The source's point is the middle class often pays disproportionately because they operate purely in that employee tax model and don't understand how the rich legally use entities and the tax code.
So it's not about doing anything illegal.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding the rules of the game, the way the system is actually set up, and using those rules legally.
Precisely. They're playing a different game, a more financially intelligent game within the existing legal framework.
This ties right into another powerful concept from the source, maybe a bit less tangible. The rich invent money.
Yeah, this idea suggests that wealth isn't just accumulated through hard work and saving, or even just inherited sometimes. It's often created. Created through financial intelligence, creativity, strategic action. Opportunities aren't just sitting out there waiting for anyone to find them. They're often seen and acted upon by minds trained to recognize them.
So it's about having the insight to see an opportunity, but also maybe the courage to actually do something about it.
Yes, the source really emphasizes that. Financial genius requires both technical knowledge and boldness. Courage, fear of loss, fear of failure, fear of what other people might think. Those things suppress that potential financial genius. Learning to manage risk rather than being paralyzed by the fear of it, that's key.
And the source gives examples of this kind of invention starting really early, right?
Yeah, like the story of the boys themselves, creating a mini business. They salvaged old comic books that were just going to be thrown out, started a library, and actually generated income from something others saw as, well, trash.
Turning trash into an asset. And the real estate examples too.
Finding distressed properties cheap, knowing how to add value, or maybe just waiting for the market to shift, using those strategies like 1031 exchanges, building cash flow through rentals.
Or investing in small growing companies.
Right, where the potential upside could be huge if you understand the business and the market dynamics. The source makes a clear distinction between just gambling investing without knowledge and intelligent risk-taking, which is investing with financial education and understanding.
Okay, so what are the specific skills the source says you need to be able to invent money like this?
It lists 4 key technical areas. First, accounting, basically financial literacy, knowing how to read the numbers, understand financial statements. Second, investing the science of money making more money.
Okay, accounting, investing.
Third, understanding markets, recognizing supply and demand, seeing opportunities based on market dynamics. And fourth, law, understanding the legal structures, like corporations, and the regulations that affect investing and business. Tax advantages, protections, that sort of thing.
And it's not just having one skill, right? The source emphasizes the synergy.
Exactly. It's how these skills work together that creates real financial intelligence. Being good at just one isn't usually enough. But importantly, the source also highlights critical non-technical skills. Things like communication, negotiation, and overcoming personal fears, especially the fear of rejection.
Ah, yeah. the story about the writer.
Right. The newspaper writer who was maybe technically a better writer, focused on writing excellence, but struggled financially, versus the author, Kiyosaki himself, who admitted he wasn't the best writer, but became a best-selling author because he mastered sales and marketing.
That anecdote really hits home, doesn't it? That sometimes the skills outside your main profession, sales, marketing, understanding systems, are what actually unlock significant wealth, according to this view.
It really does.
Yeah.
And that's why the source advises seeking work and opportunities based on the skills you will learn, especially skills that build your financial intelligence outside your current field. Not just chasing the highest paycheck right now. It's about taking that long-term view of your financial education. Where are your daily activities actually leading you? And the speed of learning is vital.
Okay, so pulling all these different pieces together, the two DABs, assets versus liabilities, financial IQ, minding your business, taxes, inventing money. What are some of the really practical strategies or mindset shifts the source champions for someone who actually wants to build wealth?
Well, one of the most emphasized disciplines is pay yourself first. The source presents this as like a non-negotiable rule. Every single month before you pay any bills, any expenses, you allocate a portion of your income straight to your asset column.
Okay, but what if you don't have enough left to pay your bills after you do that? I mean, that's where most people would panic and raid the savings or investments, right?
And the source says, absolutely not. Do not touch the money you allocated to assets. Instead, use the pressure of those unpaid bills as motivation. Motivation to find new ways to generate income, to be more resourceful, to kind of force your financial creativity, your financial intelligence to kick in.
Wow, that's a real shift in discipline. Requires some nerve. What about getting help? Seeking advice?
The source advocates strongly for pay your brokers well. Basically, invest in good professional advice. Accountants, brokers, attorneys, people who are skilled in building assets and can help you navigate the legal and strategic side. The source kind of notes that people are often happy to tip generously in the expense column, like a waiter, but then they get really stingy when it comes to paying professionals who could actually help them build wealth in the asset column.
Interesting point. There's also that concept, being an Indian giver in investing. It sounds a bit provocative.
It is a provocative phrase the source uses, yes. It refers to the idea that in certain types of investments, your first goal is to get your initial money back as quickly as possible. That's your return on investment, your ROI. But just as importantly, once your initial capital is back in your pocket, you focus on what you get for free afterwards. The ongoing cash flow, the potential appreciation, maybe a piece of the business, the additional assets or systems you've effectively acquired. You get your seed money back, but you keep the asset and all its future benefits.
Okay, get your money back fast, then keep the upside. And for people just starting out, maybe with not much capital, the source suggests focus versus balance.
Yeah. The argument is that with limited money, trying to diversify too broadly just dilutes your efforts and maybe your learning. Instead, focus your learning and your investment dollars in one or maybe just a few key areas you understand well. They use the acronym FOCUS, follow one course until successful. Concentrate your resources, really learn an area, succeed there, then maybe branch out. It's contrasted with always playing it safe, which the source kind of frames as playing not to lose instead of playing to win financially.
That makes sense. But this kind of focus and taking risks, it requires overcoming some pretty big emotional hurdles, right? Like fear, laziness, the source talks about those.
Oh, absolutely. Fear is presented as a huge barrier. Fear of losing money, fear of making a mistake, fear of what others will think, fear of rejection. Doubt is expensive, it costs you opportunities. And laziness. Well, surprisingly, the source says it's often masked by being super busy. Busy working hard in that E or S quadrant, maybe to avoid facing the actual financial problems or the need to learn something new and uncomfortable. The source suggests you actually need a bit of healthy greed, or maybe better put, a strong desire for something better, the what's in it for me factor, WIIFM, to push through that inertia and fear.
And failure isn't the end of the world in this view.
Not at all. It's seen as part of the process, something you learn from. The source uses examples like Colonel Sanders failing over 1,000 times before KFC took off, or even historical lessons like remember the Alamo. Failure is just feedback, an opportunity to learn and adjust. People who avoid failure entirely also tend to avoid significant success.
Which brings us back around to that idea of education, but with a long-term view.
Right. Always be asking, what skills am I learning here? Not just, what's the paycheck? Look for chances to learn sales, marketing, business systems, negotiation, the saying, those core financial intelligence skills.
Yeah.
Even if the pay isn't great initially, It's about positioning yourself for that long-term financial freedom.
And finally, the source suggests that teaching this stuff to others can actually help you.
Yeah, teach and you shall receive. The act of teaching forces you to clarify your own understanding. It exposes the gaps in your own knowledge, and interestingly, it often seems to attract new insights or opportunities back to you. The more you teach, the more you learn, and potentially, the more you receive.
Okay, to kind of wrap all these ideas together nicely, the source often uses that analogy, the pipeline story. Can you share that one?
Sure. It's a simple but really powerful story. Imagine two guys, Ed and Bill. They're hired to supply water to a village that's far from the nearest lake. Ed immediately grabs 2 buckets and starts hauling water back and forth all day, every day. Works incredibly hard, right? Trading his time and his physical effort directly for money.
He's the perfect example of the E or S quadrant, right? Working for money, limited by his own capacity, how many buckets he can carry.
Exactly. Bill, on the other hand, he kind of disappears for a while. People wonder what he's doing. He spends his time writing a business plan, finding investors, maybe forming a corporation, hiring people, and building a pipeline system from the lake all the way to the village.
So he's not carrying buckets, he's building an asset, a system.
Precisely. And when Bill finally finishes and turns on the tap, his pipeline delivers clean water to the village 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, often at a lower cost than Ed can manage with his buckets. Bill might only make a tiny amount per gallon, but he delivers millions of gallons. He generates passive income, whether he's physically there hauling water or not. And then he can replicate that pipeline system in other villages.
So Bill clearly represents the B or I quadrant, building a business system or an asset that generates income independent of his direct labor.
Yeah, the story just perfectly synthesizes that core message. Working hard, carrying buckets, while maybe necessary sometimes, has limits. Building a pipeline, creating a system, acquiring an asset that's what allows your income to scale beyond your personal time and effort. And in the information age we live in now, the source argues the skills to build these pipelines are more valuable than ever before.
Okay, so to really wrap up this deep dive into the source material, the core distinction we've been talking about, it isn't really about how much money you earn in your job, is it?
Not primarily, no. It's about how much you keep, and maybe more importantly, how you make your money work for you. By focusing your effort, your resources on acquiring assets, things that generate income, rather than primarily acquiring liabilities that just drain your cash flow.
It all seems to circle back to that idea of financial intelligence. And the encouraging part is it's not necessarily about being born rich or starting with a huge pile of cash. It's about understanding these fundamental principles, shifting your mindset, maybe challenging some old beliefs, and then taking consistent action to build that asset column, even if you start small. Like the source says, money itself is just an idea.
And maybe to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder, drawing directly from the perspective we've explored today. Take a hard look. Are your daily financial activities mostly focused on working hard for earned income, paying taxes, and buying things that take money out of your pocket? Or are you actively, consciously directing resources and effort towards building an asset column, something that will put money into your pocket and work towards your financial freedom over the long haul? Remember that line from the source? It takes only a few dollars to start and grow it into something big.